Mhm.
how do you think of sort of modern dating dysfunction, demographic collapse, all
Mhm.
of that stuff? Is that, from 1200, was that just the first domino gets flicked and it's an inevitable kind of all the way along? How do you conceptualize this altogether?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word inevitable, but I completely agree with your intentions behind that. Yeah, that is what set it in motion. We've always had arranged marriages and lived in kin groups, and then more strictly under agriculture, but still. And then we were set on this path toward individual choice, never great individualism. And then it's just to have, like we talked about in the very beginning, it's hard to convince people to take upon themselves the burden of decades of pair bonding with the same person and providing for offspring. And when you have a strong individualistic culture and a mating ideology that says that this is optional, that you don't necessarily have to do that, we're facing an evolution that is quite predictable. And as you've talked about on many of your podcasts, it seems to be going in a direction where we've ran out of tools. There's not much we could do. We had in the 1930s a decline in fertility also, which we countered. The numbers I've seen in Scandinavia went down to 1.8, which was seen as a catastrophe, and then we countered through effectuating social democracy. We made it materially easier to have children through social democratic welfare. All that has played out now. That's no longer an option in Norway now. The average woman, she receives more than $1.2 million more from the state than she pays in taxes, while men pay more in taxes than they receive. And when even that can't motivate reproduction at replacement levels, and this is Norway is the richest country in the world, and we have the best welfare system. And when even that kind of money transfer can't facilitate reproduction, there's very little other countries can do. So up until 2010, Scandinavia was an anomaly. Across the West, fertility has declined for a long time. So we thought that the answer, or many thought that the answer was that other countries had to be like Scandinavia. They needed gender equality because we're the most gender equal region, and they needed generous welfare. And now in the past decade, the Norwegian fertility rate dropped in 2010 from 2.0 to 1.5, and now it's dropped down to 1.4. And that's with each woman on average being transferred $1.2 million over a lifetime. That's a lot of money. There's economic incentives no longer cease to work. So we kind of know that for other countries too, that would only be a short-term solution that would be countered by other forces that are more powerful. So if we think it's a good idea to still make people and avoid a demographic collapse, it's very difficult to see what kind of means we can effectuate that would have a substantial effect that could turn this around.
What are the forces that are driving the decrease in fertility rates at the moment?
Well, the larger forces, the material ones, is urbanization, like we've talked about before, and like many others have talked about, how there's been, when we lived as agriculturalists, having children was free labor, and now they're just huge expenses. So that is one issue. The other one is ideological, that we no longer, with romantic love, the meaning of life was to merge with your partner and have a bunch of children. With confluent love, it's about self-realization, reward, convenience. When we have those beliefs, we're just less incentivized to take upon ourselves these burdens. So I also mentioned fear of the future. And then you have, what I've researched a bit, is what happens with our mate preferences in this new environment of the past decades. How on one side, when you make, as in Scandinavia, when you have gender equality and you have generous welfare, it makes it materially easier to have children. So that counts in a positive direction, but it also disincentivizes women from pair bonding with men of similar mate value. So that's another aspect of these ideologies and mating regimes, that it's really difficult to make women mate with men with low mate value unless they have to, unless they are materially dependent on it or coerced to do so by their society. We have two attraction systems. We have the original one that we talked about when we started 6 million years ago, were promiscuous maters. And this is a very discriminatory system for women, where they're supposed to only be promiscuously attracted by the very most attractive men. Maybe this is somewhere between 5 and 20% of men, probably closer to 5. And then 4 million years ago, we evolved this other system to facilitate pair bonding, which is a much more, in a sense, democratic system, where a much larger proportion of men is able to trigger that love mechanism that motivates a woman to mate with them. But we see that when women don't have to, they become choosier, and they direct their efforts at men with higher mate value than what they have themselves. And that makes it harder to pair up more people within a community, which then will have adverse effects on the fertility.
Right. And when women are not financially or resourcefully beholden to their partner in order to be able to keep them ticking over, because they have no job, they have no education, or they have limited socioeconomic opportunities, I need to stay with my partner, because the alternative is that me and potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children are out on the street. So we were basically kind of like a financial prisoner in some regards to their husband. And now that women don't need that anymore, the gods are off.
And for modern ideology, and I'm sure both you and I feel this way, this is great for women. Women aren't dependent on being with a man. They are independent. They have their own money, their own economy, and they can make their own choices, and they can choose to direct their efforts and compete harder for the high value men instead of settling for someone with a similar value as themselves. But then the consequence of that is that we have a very high increase in singledom. We have a decline in fertility. And it also affects people's well-being. People generally express a desire to be pair bonded, and they want to be together with someone. That's kind of what we've been doing the last 4 million years. And then when people react to different incentives in the modern environment, we see that quite a few of those work counter to people being able to find each other and create relationships. Yeah, no, if there's so many depressive statistics. If you want to look at what actually get the fertility rate up, you have to, what would really work is to, and we don't want any of this, we have to get rid of gender equality, get rid of prosperity, domestic violence works. There's tons of stuff that work to make women submit to being in a relationship that they otherwise wouldn't want to be in.
Yeah, to go.